So I want to first start off by thanking my patrons, my one-time donors, my Subscribe subscribers, and my channel members for this video even being possible. As I've talked about in the past, I'm essentially up against the wall when it comes to YouTube and their terms of service when talking about crime-related stories. I do everything I can in order to follow their guidelines, including just not showing the videos, because when I've tried blurring out violence in certain videos in order to fit their guidelines, YouTube has deemed that blurred nudity. Yes, I know I brought this up multiple times before, and I will continue to do so, honestly, because it's still shocking and stunning that this actually happened, and that even after contacting creator support to get a re-review, they doubled down on this being blurred nudity. But those are the rules that I'm dealing with. So thank you so much to the people who donate to this channel in order to make these type of crime breakdown videos even possible. So we are 2 months removed from the tragic death of one George Floyd while he was in the custody of the Minneapolis police. Now, like many people, when I first saw this video that I'm not going to show you because of YouTube's terms of service, I had a visceral reaction to it. I thought that this clearly looked like a murder on behalf of the officer that knelt on Floyd's neck. And like many people, I was upset about this. Now, little did any of us know that at the time that this video actually was released, that not only would it go viral and elicit outrage from almost every person who ended up seeing this video, but it would actually trigger a series of events that dominoed down into essentially rewriting the bargain between citizens and their local police departments across the country. Politicians from across the political spectrum were all of a sudden bending the knee to a resurgent Black Lives Matter movement. Every major corporation, including the one that I'm uploading this video to on right now, YouTube, put out their support for this organization. Mainstream celebrities, internet celebrities also jumped in and piled on because, according to them, this case was indicative of systemic racism, and it proved once and for all that we needed to have dramatic police reform in order to solve this long-standing issue in this country. Now, while the rioting and the unparalleled acts of left-wing violence kind of took center stage after this video went viral, and thus I wasn't covering this video, there was one point where I did decide that I was ready to sit down and make a video. And this is when Chauvin was charged with third-degree murder, because this caused a series of terrible and awful takes from people across the internet who believe that for some reason the Minneapolis police, the Attorney General, who is Keith Ellison for the state of Minnesota, and all of these government officials were somehow conspiring in order to let the officer who killed Floyd and appeared to have killed Floyd before the world to see off easy on a third-degree murder charge. Now, me not being prone to hysteria, not being prone to overreaction, and actually having the knowledge and forethought to actually read the laws in question in order to determine whether or not the charges fit, rather than just say, third degree, I was really hurt by this video, it must be first degree, it has to be the harshest crime, even if those charges don't fit, read the charges and looked at the video and realized that third-degree murder was the most in-line charge that you could have charged the officer with under the circumstances, just based solely on the video. Now, despite the fact that Minnesota's third-degree murder statute was designed for situations where somebody doesn't have premeditation, where they don't intend to kill somebody, but when they act so irresponsibly and with such a disregard for human life that they do something so inherently dangerous that ends up causing that person's death, a lot of people started freaking out on the internet about these charges. They started reading, that this was saying it was an accident, when that's nowhere what the third-degree murder statute was actually saying. And chief among the bad takes on the internet that I was going to highlight and take down were the takes put forward by Jacqueline Glenn. And it wasn't just her take on the charges, which was completely asinine and wrong in every way possible, but it was also her overall take on this situation, because when you listen to her video and you compare it to what actually happened, it just makes no sense.
Watching that video of George Floyd is one of the most disturbing things I have ever seen. And I understand that a lot of people have to struggle with racial profiling and discrimination.
There was no racial profiling in this situation, Jacqueline. The police were called specifically on the specific person, George Floyd. It had nothing to do with race. It had everything to do with Floyd allegedly giving a counterfeit $10 or $20 bill to a store clerk, and thus triggering them to call 911 because he tried to pass off a counterfeit bill as a legitimate one.
I brought up that I don't know that third-degree murder charges satisfy me. I feel like I've heard rumors that the cop knew him before, that they had worked together in some kind of security guard situation. And if that is true, then I do think first-degree murder would be way more appropriate. And the difference is one is premeditated, one is thought out and planned, and the other one is manslaughter. And I was really angry that the police officer didn't get charged with more, at least second degree.
No, Jacqueline, third-degree murder is not manslaughter. It's not remotely close to manslaughter. One of the good ways that you can tell on whether or not a charge is actually manslaughter is if the charge is actually manslaughter. If it's third-degree murder, that means they're charging them with a degree of murder. And the reason you know, even if this sounds a little bit too convoluted for you, that third-degree murder and manslaughter are different charges, is because Chauvin was initially charged with third-degree murder and manslaughter, indicating that the charges were different, thus filed separately, thus charged to him both at the same time, which you can't do if they're the same exact charge. But the bad portions of Jacqueline's take did not end there. It actually got quite a bit goofier than her butchering not only Minnesota state law, but basic knowledge and common sense when it comes to law and what charges are. She also, for some reason, decided that the fact that they may have worked together 15 years prior to this incident would somehow be sufficient enough to charge first-degree murder.
I mean, I've heard rumors that the cop knew him before, that they had worked together in some kind of security guard situation. And if that is true, then I do think first-degree murder would be way more appropriate. And the difference is one is premeditated, one is thought out.
Now, first-degree murder in a lot of states is with malice and forethought. This typically means that you would go far beyond what would be considered normal premeditation, which, depending on the state that you're in, can be established in an instant. It's the idea that you planned this out well in advance and you had no emotion or remorse in your planning and execution of that plan. The idea that Chauvin may be working in the same location as Floyd 15 years ago is enough to establish malice and forethought, that it's enough to establish even premeditation. Like, he had a beef with him 15 years ago and he was like, just wait. One of these days, you're going to pass a counterfeit bill when I become a police officer, and I'm going to be the one to arrest you, and that's when I'm going to execute my plan, is absurd. This connection that they may or may not have from 15 years prior is in no way, shape, or form indicative of anything that is going to lead to any charges in this case. It's absurd on its face, and it's absurd that this was stated in a video where you have to shoot this, say this ridiculous thing, then edit it, then upload it. Check your standards, Jacqueline. That's absolutely ridiculous. Now, I don't want to harp too much on Jacqueline Glenn's lack of knowledge when it comes to the Floyd case. She's just somebody who is ignorant when it comes to legal matters and probably doesn't know that examining criminal codes would probably be more indicative of analyzing whether or not the charges would fit than reading stuff randomly on Twitter. And again, she wasn't the only one with a terrible take. One of our favorite people here on this channel, Hunter Avalon, had an absolutely abysmal take when it came to this in his little documentary about how Floyd's life was totally indicative of systemic racism. And the part that I want to highlight from his little mini documentary is this one right here.
Initially, it was thought the officer had only contributed to Floyd's untimely death, but an independent autopsy found Floyd died directly from asphyxiation, meaning the officer is wholly responsible for his death. These findings were corroborated by a second autopsy examination.
Now, everything Hunter Avalon said right there was 100% incorrect, wrong, whatever you want to call it. I'm guessing that the reason that Hunter was wrong is because at the Hunter Avalon School of Free Thought, they just read headlines and they don't look into the details a little bit more. So we're going to go into exactly how wrong Hunter Avalon is about what he just stated there. First and foremost, there were only 2 autopsies conducted on George Floyd. There was the autopsy conducted by the state of Minnesota, which deemed that the officer was partially responsible, as well as drugs in Floyd's system that contributed to his death. Then there was the autopsy done by the family's coroner, somebody that they hired for the civil case. And the reason why the family hired a separate coroner for the civil case is because civil cases work a little bit differently than criminal cases. In criminal cases, you have to prove somebody's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. In civil cases, you just have to prove more likely than not that somebody is at fault, especially in a wrongful death case. But more than that, more than the 51% requirement to win a civil case, the more percentage of fault that you can assign to the guilty party, the more money you would get paid out to you. This is why they hired an independent, quote-unquote, coroner to do a second autopsy of Floyd. However, despite the headlines, despite what Hunter Avalon said right there, there's actually no distinction between what Michael Baden's report was and what the state's report was. Don't believe me? Listen to Baden himself.
The compressive pressure of the neck and back are not seen at autopsy because the pressure has been released by the time the body comes to the medical examiner's office. It can only be seen, serious compressive pressure on the neck and back can only be seen while the pressure is being applied, or when, as in this instance, it is captured on video, are not seen at autopsy.
So as you can see through that video, Baden said clearly that he did not see any evidence of asphyxiation at autopsy. He saw no evidence of compression at autopsy. He was basing that diagnosis on the video, which is weird because when I hire a coroner, I tend to hire him to do the job of a coroner. So why is Baden making this distinction? The reason he's making this distinction is because while Baden can say whatever he wants, because of course he's being hired by the family to produce the results that the family produced, eventually in a civil case, Baden's going to have to testify under oath to what his findings were. So while he can speculate and give theories based on the video, which I'm perfectly capable of doing, and you're perfectly capable of doing, what's written down in his report that he will submit to a court of law and he'll actually testify to is not in any way, shape, or form distinct from what the prosecutors are actually putting forward. So Hunter is just wrong that the second autopsy showed death by asphyxiation. You can hear the coroner himself who conducted that second autopsy say the exact opposite. And he's also wrong saying that another autopsy confirmed it. There were only two. What he basically said is that Baden conducted the second autopsy and then implied that he did it twice and that those two outweigh the one, when Baden's one single solo report is basically 100% in line with the state's report that already pre-existed it. Now, for all intents and purposes, this was the video, me taking not smart takes by people like Jacqueline Glenn and Hunter Avalon and running them through a meat grinder because in reality their takes are based on emotion and headlines and nothing rooted in facts. However, then the Attorney General announced that the charges against Chauvin would be upgraded from third-degree murder to second-degree murder, and I thought, oh, well, if they're upgrading the charges, then there must be some additional evidence outside of the video that we've seen so far that would indicate that there's something warranting an upgrade in charges. So I decided to put the video on hold and wait for the body cam footage to come out so I could examine it and determine whether or not through that footage if there was something indicating of a little bit more intent on the part of Chauvin, thus warranting the upgrade in charges. But again, we're 2 months past the incident and we have no body cam footage. So what's going on? Now, while we don't have the body cam footage, and honestly, it is shameful the fact that this footage has not been released, think about all the damage that has been done to our country based on the snippet of video that we have so far and the anger that that video induced. For people in the state of Minnesota, the city of Minneapolis, to withhold the further evidence, the further context that's desperately needed to ameliorate some of the suffering that's going on in this country is borderline criminal, in my opinion. That doesn't mean that we don't have anything from the body cam footage. In fact, recently, due to a court dispute on whether or not some of the charges should be dismissed against the other officers, the transcript of the body cam footage was made public. Now, what I could do with the information that the transcripts of the body cam footage was released is pull a Hunter Avalon, where I just look at the headlines and make my judgments based on the headlines and don't look any further into that information. I go with, Floyd said that he couldn't breathe 20 times, that's in the headline, so wow, the officers are really bad people, and they should be convicted of 25th degree murder, which is 10 times higher than first degree murder, because that's where my legal opinions come from, my brain right here, and not based on anything rooted in fact. Or I could actually read the body cam footage transcripts, because when you read the transcripts, some things become a little bit more clear, and I can now understand why the far left-leaning governments in Minneapolis and the Attorney General Keith Ellison have no interest in releasing the body cam footage, because the video that's out there now couldn't possibly be worse for the officer. The transcripts of the body cam footage, however, actually kind of reduce a little bit of the liability depending on the tone. Now, I still think we need the footage in order to make some determinations, because while I'm certain that this transcript can basically exonerate the 3 other officers, I need to be able to hear the tone in Chauvin's voice in order to make a determination based on him. Because while it is true that Floyd did say he couldn't breathe over 20 times according to the transcript of the body cam footage, what the headlines leave out, because it's infinitely more important than him actually saying that, is when he started saying that. And for context, let's go over the basic facts that everybody agrees to when it comes to the Floyd case. Floyd was pulled over in his own vehicle by the officers. At that point, he resisted arrest, but eventually was handcuffed, and then he was set down on a storefront where the officer spoke to him. After speaking to him for a little bit of time, the officers asked Floyd to get up, and they walked him over to the police car. Floyd then fell before being put inside the police car, before then being taken out of the police car, laid down, and then eventually the knee was placed on Floyd's neck. And after the knee is on the neck is where that infamous video starts. Now, at what point during this chain of events do you think Floyd started complaining about having trouble breathing? Well, we don't have to speculate on that because we have the transcript of the body cam footage. And what I can determine from the transcript is that Floyd started complaining about having trouble breathing prior to being put inside the car before he was taken out of the car and laid down on the street. Another thing that you can tell from the transcript is that Floyd was not being laid down due to the fact that he was resisting arrest as some sort of punitive measure. In fact, Floyd asked the officers in order to lay him down, which the officers complied with because, again, according to the transcript, they believed that Floyd, due to the drugs in his system, was experiencing something called excited delirium syndrome, which could be fatal. So the officers didn't lay Floyd down on the ground in order to punish him. They laid him down to better suit his medical needs and to meet one of Floyd's requests, because Floyd had been complaining since before they tried to put him in the vehicle of having trouble breathing and thinking that he was on the verge of death. Now, this makes a lot of sense because Floyd was reported to have, by the first autopsy, a lethal concoction of drugs, including fentanyl and methamphetamine in his system. And one of the things that happens to you when you have so many opioids in your system is it compromises your respiratory system. Now, the conversation, which again is absent one of the key things, and that is tone, because we only have the transcripts and not the video, when it comes to Floyd, was not about how they were going to get Floyd for being a pain in the ass, or they wanted to get Floyd because he happened to be African American. The conversation was related to Floyd's medical needs. In fact, one of the officers, the one who asked for the charges to be dismissed, actually asked Chauvin if they should lay him differently to better suit his medical need. Also, something that stuck out to me in the transcript is that the officers noticed that Floyd had foam around his mouth, or what appeared to be foam around his mouth, before they tried to lay him down, before they even tried to bring him towards the car. They also noticed and commented on, again in the transcript, that Floyd was bleeding from his mouth, again, way before he was ever laid down on the ground and way before the knee was ever placed on his neck. Furthermore, according to the Minneapolis PD's training, when you are in a situation where you suspect that a suspect is going through excited delirium syndrome, it is protocol to lay this person down, not on their stomach, but on their side, and call an ambulance. Also, more context, the fact that Floyd in the video was so able to move his neck back and forth means that it's incredibly unlikely, according to one of the articles that I read on the subject, which, again, take it with a grain of salt, that the pressure being put on the neck by Chauvin was fatal pressure. Now, I want to be perfectly clear. I am not an expert on excited delirium syndrome. I'm not an expert on how to read autopsies, and what I'm going on is some of the sources that I have, what Minnesota Police's procedure is, and some of the accounts from paramedics who had to deal with this syndrome. I am not saying that Chauvin 100% is innocent. What I am saying is that it is very unlikely that any of the other officers besides Chauvin will be convicted of anything, because they were in no way the ones putting the pressure on his neck. Floyd did not die from any scientific measurement of asphyxiation, and one of the officers that was also holding Floyd was arguing with Chauvin lightly about where best to lay him in order to ensure his survival. The conversation is very indicative of officers looking to take care of Floyd. However, that's not fully the case because there are sections of the transcript where Chauvin might be yelling at Floyd because maybe he doesn't believe he's having difficulty breathing. Like, he did call it in and he did follow procedure, but there are instances where he says, well, you're talking an awful lot for somebody who says that you can't breathe. And I'm paraphrasing there, but I believe in the transcript it's something like, you're using a lot of oxygen with all those words and all that yelling. So there still is a chance that Chauvin will go down for this, because the video on its own looks incredibly bad. And whether or not Floyd was going through excited delirium syndrome, it doesn't look like the best way to treat that is to put your knee on the person who's going through that syndrome's neck. It doesn't make a lot of sense what Chauvin's actions were, but more importantly, the video of Chauvin with his knee on his neck looks absolutely terrible, and that could be terrible enough even if you get a bunch of experts to argue that the officer's actions did not lead to Floyd's death, might still be enough for a jury to convict Chauvin of at least third-degree murder. Second-degree murder, based on the transcripts, no way. There is no way that there was any intent to kill Floyd on behalf of Chauvin. And while second-degree murder does have certain instances where intent is not required, they're very specific instances, like if you kill somebody who has a restraining order against you, or if you kill somebody in a drive-by shooting that you didn't intend to kill, because drive-by shootings are ridiculously dangerous. They do not apply in any way, shape, or form to what Chauvin did here in this situation by the transcript and by the original video. Look, I know what I'm saying here is not going to be popular. I know it's not going to go over well. I understand what the majority opinion actually is. But the majority opinion does not make it a factual opinion. If the facts are leaning some other direction, I'm not going to come out here and blow smoke up your ass so you can feel better about yourself. I'm going to tell you the truth as I see it. Like I said, I don't think that this enough on its own will exonerate Chauvin, but I do think that it's very important that the American people see the body cam footage. If not for more context on Chauvin's actions, but for us to understand why so many changes are happening in our countries, why so many departments are being defunded or abolished. The idea that we don't have the full picture and we're acting on that should feel wrong to you, no matter what side of the issues that you're actually on. But hey, those are just my thoughts and opinions. This is my analysis of the facts as they have become public so far. Obviously, it's open to change in the future. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like this video, then please show me by leaving a like. You can subscribe for more content. Follow me on my social media accounts. Support me via the support links if you want more videos like this. Till next time.